How to be an artist. Step 22. Animation Nomad. With guest Ken Keys. What have you been working on then since like, I mean, geez, that's a long time since. I can't believe it's been 10 years. I think about everything I've been doing since EA.
It's been
Good gracious.
probably it's probably been about 8 years, I guess,
Okay.
or 7.5 years or something.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about
Seven and a
right.
half years, 3 months, 14 days, 38 minutes. I have
You're
no
counting
idea.
everyone, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while, but strangely enough, it's still I still have very fond memories of EA Salt Lake and the team there,
Yeah.
and the work that was done there, and
Yeah.
and the culture that I think was more about what Vance and Headgate had created rather than what EA had created. But I got a taste of that towards the beginning before Sims
Before
changed the
changed
studio, which,
everything.
I mean, I mean, so that. But that was
You
nice.
know,
It was definitely a great, some great potential in that studio. Great talent, and I don't regret. Well, no, I don't regret. uh, uh, yeah, made a lot of friends that I still keep in touch with to this day. So
yeah, I was interesting you brought up Headgate. That's what I think about a lot when I think back on EA is kind of like, it's one of these things you don't realize what you have till it's gone, especially, sometimes as a young artist, as was at that time, when you like have such big ambitions and you're like so dissatisfied with where you're at. And then when you're done, you're like, wait a second, that was pretty cool. Like, particularly, you can kind of mark it by the change in studios. I think in a little bit is when it was in Bountiful, there was still kind of that Headgate culture, and then that
yes,
was slowly sucked. The life was sucked out of it after the Salt Lake move.
it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
and even though I came in like later,
Mm-hmm.
I that it was still palpable. I could still feel that culture that was there. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, how would you describe it? I have kind of my way of thinking about it, but what was it? What was it about the Headgate culture that was compelling?
everybody was very welcoming and friendly when I
Hmm.
arrived. There was a sense that I was joining something that was established,
Hmm.
that had some history to it, and there was even though I didn't work on some of the products or some of the projects there. I just I mean I was coming to that studio from having been in a lot of studios over the years,
Mm-hmm.
in games and film. It just felt like we were really capable of doing anything we put our minds to
Yeah.
initially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It had that feel about it. I mean, there was limitations, and there was like variances of different levels of experience uh,
Mm-hmm.
there, but it just
Made things
felt like,
exciting.
yeah, it just felt like there was stuff we could have achieved had we had the right
Vision.
visions. That yeah, I think there was definitely the talent and the enthusiasm there to do something cool. I think there was a lot of hope that something cool would be built out of the studio.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. I mean, there was the sense of trust and maybe even intimacy with Headgate, what had already been formed. But also, yeah, there was
Yeah,
excitement. There were things where like, hey, people really wanted to do something great there. And I always thought I really loved the culture of game design
hmm
that was there. Like the way the people thought about like I particularly think about Dustin Um, Dustin
Yep.
Hanson and
Yep.
Joe Borey. I really loved like working with them, how they work together. And yeah, it was interesting to see that kind of little by little deteriorate over time.
Yes.
Um, and it's funny. One of my most like vivid memories. This thing you're kind of talking about, like, oh, some really amazing things could have been done with that group. I think I remember you like literally saying that once. I think a bunch of us were like walking to lunch, and you were just like, just imagine what this group of people could do together, which was like the saddest thing you could say because clearly we were working together
Yeah.
and we weren't doing that stuff,
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
So
no, it was definitely, you know, full of great potential. That and everybody worked so hard to try and build something, but it takes more. It takes more, unfortunately. And I definitely enjoyed a lot of the people there. I enjoyed just it was a nice studio, nice people, and I enjoyed caricaturing them at every opportunity I got. Um,
it was just such like a quirky mix of people. I mean, obviously you had a lot of
yeah,
Utahns there, but a lot of people mixed in from all over the place, just stirred into this pot. And then there's just something that clicked with this weird
it's
mix of
true.
people,
It's true.
like I almost think the recipe was best. I mean, old Headgate people might disagree, but kind of as old Headgate was starting to get mixed in with all these kind of new weirdos from all over the
Yep, that's
place.
me. I remember a conversation that Matt Peterson and I had,
uh,
and I'd been there for probably over a year, maybe,
uh-huh.
and we were sitting. He was sitting at the desk next to me at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about people coming and joining the studio, and he said to me
Mm-hmm.
that um, before I came, people had heard who that we're hiring this guy. He's got some film experience
Uh-huh.
and done a bit of and he said that everybody was really sure I was going to be an asshole. That's what he told. That's what he told me. He's like, yeah, we were convinced you were going to be an
Like
asshole.
a really
Yeah,
arrogant,
yeah,
like,
you were
yeah,
definitely. That's what we were all prepped for, which I thought was that's hilarious. That's. I'm sorry to disappoint you.
yeah,
Maybe I was. I could. It could have been.
yeah. Well, we both know that within the EA ecosystem, it's not an unusual thing for there to be an asshole or two wandering around.
It's true, and I think it really, in terms of me being an asshole, it really depends who you talk to.
Sure,
So
I guess
I'm
so.
sure there's people that, yeah, definitely put me in that category.
You were talking about like people that you liked at the studio, but I was going to ask, well, let's talk about the people you didn't like, Ken. Let's
Oh
make
yeah.
this interesting.
Okay, hang on. How long do we have? No, uh,
Yeah.
that
Uh,
would be a short conversation. Thankfully,
yeah, yeah. It was good times. So,
it would be a conversation, but it would be a short one.
it would be a short one. So, I mean, that's just kind of the nature of working at studios is that they are like these beautiful. I don't know what you call them, like desert orchids. Orchids aren't in the desert, but they kind of like bloom and then they kind of like die,
Yeah,
right?
they do.
Yeah.
They do, and I've been there at the beginning of many, and at the end
Mm.
of a number, and in the middle. Uh,
Hmm.
I've seen studios go from 100 people up to 1,100 people,
Jeez.
and I've seen them go from 1,100 people down to like five. So I've seen it both ways.
I think you're a really good example of like one of the realities if you decide to dedicate your life to art is that especially something like studio type stuff as an animator or working in games is it's really if you want to find work like consistent work you kind of got to take on a little bit of a nomadic lifestyle, right?
Oh yes, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, thankfully, I was kind of born a nomad.
Mm,
From the age of 4, my parents moved from Scotland to Australia. So
that's right.
with me and my sisters and brother. So the nomadic stuff I must have caught the bug early, I think. So
Yeah, it's in the
and
genes.
my, and luckily my wife was a film editor, so she was she was okay with like moving around and traveling, and she's an Australian who they always like to travel and move.
That's interesting. So do you kind of still kind of identify yourself as like as Scottish, having grown up in Australia? Is that how you think of yourself?
I I don't know how to think of myself these days.
Yeah.
I'll meet somebody for the first time and they'll hear my accent, and I can see it on their face. They're like, "Where the hell is he from?" I don't even know what he said. What kind of accent is that?
I thought the
I
very
don't know
thing when we started
myself.
this conversation.
I don't
Yeah.
know myself what accent. That's one of my friends at when I was working at PDI on Shrek. One of my friends, Colin Hennon, uh,
Hmm.
called me on a Scotland, and I thought that's pretty good. Hadn't heard that one before. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm so much more than that. I mean, I've lived
Sure.
in the States for now, 20 years now. So
It'd be kind of good to kind of map out the journey, the nomadic journey of Ken Keyes. But I love anytime you tell us about your career. It's just like you have been like everywhere in the animation. You're like the Forrest Gump of animation. More
it's
intelligent, but you know.
well, I'm not so sure. Uh, yeah, and my wife's name is Jenny too. So
There you
I
go.
never thought about that before. That's scary.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so yeah, it's been a journey, but not just a journey geographically. It's been like a
Yeah.
journey. I got into animation because I love to draw, and
Mm.
I'm I spent years and years drawing, and then the industry changed, and I had to learn how to use a computer, and then so it's really. I feel like I've been riding the crest of this wave of technology,
Hmm.
you know, for my whole career.
Yeah.
And you either embrace the change or you fight against it and you do something else. So
Yeah.
I've always tried to embrace that stuff and try to be, you know, a little ahead of the curve if I could be.
Sure. Yeah.
You know,
Now was if we go back, I know you've told me before that you did some time at Scooby Doo. Was
Scooby Doo.
was there
Yeah.
stuff that predated
Uh,
Scooby Doo, or what was
yeah.
your
So,
entree into this business like?
well, my first job in the industry was working for Hanna-Barbera Studios in Sydney.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So that's where the Scooby Doo thing came in. So we did
Gotcha.
lots of Saturday morning cartoon stuff.
Hmm. You built my
Scooby Doo, and
childhood in Sydney, in Hanna Barbera
I
Sydney.
yes probably did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
apologize
It's your fault.
for all that scarring.
Yeah.
Uh, but for me, it was a great introduction to the industry because I had no idea there was an animation industry in Sydney.
Hmm.
I was at college doing studying drawing and painting
Hmm.
because I didn't even know about animation. So a friend of mine took me to a film called The Secret of Nim, and I saw
Oh,
that and thought,
geez.
hey, they're still making these films.
Yeah.
I should look into see if there's an industry. And sure enough, there'd been a industry in Australia for quite some time. Hanna Barbera had built a studio there in the 70s or late 60s, I think.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so there was a long history of Saturday morning stuff being done. The Australians tend to grow up on lots of American culture and lots of British culture. So I think they started the studio down in Sydney because I think Australians got the humor. So
Hmm.
it seemed culturally it seemed like a good fit. So yeah, I'm glad they did.
Did you have that experience when you first started working there of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is my job. I'm doing this.
Uh, Yeah, I started as an in-betweener. I did a
Hmm.
test. In fact, it was I went to the test with my friend from college who was the crazy person who was crazy about animation. And
Mm-hmm.
we went and did a test. There was like 40 people in a room or something. And we all had to do these in-betweens. And I got a call back, and my friend sadly didn't get a call back. So that was
Wow.
the end of that
Okay.
friendship. Uh, Never heard from him again. Um, and so yeah, I became an in-betweener, and then did that for probably about 6 months on
Hmm.
Donkey Kong or some like TV version of Donkey Kong, something like that.
Oh wow.
Um,
Huh.
then I I found the line test machine, the animation line test machine, and
Hmm.
started messing around with that. A couple of people showed me how to use it, and so when I wasn't in betweening other people, like animators' scenes, I would try my hand at animation. I'd show it to people, and they'd laugh at me and tell me to get the hell out of here. I'm busy, kid. Um, and I go back and test it again and great. Eventually you'd find people who would actually take the time to look at it. After about, I think it was about 8 months, I got managed to get into the animation department with thoughts
Wow.
that I'll go in there and I'll crash and burn and I'll end up back in the in between department
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's a
Yeah.
lot of people went and did animation tests and then they end up saying, you know what, they'd end up back in the in between department again. So, but I didn't. I kept going. So, I must have been doing something
Yeah.
right, or just really faking it really well.
It's a hard one to fake. That's when it's a little hard to hide. Yeah.
It's yeah, true, true. No, it was good. It was just so much drawing and so much to learn and lots of it was there was moments where like I couldn't believe I'm actually drawing for like 8 hours a day and people are paying me to do that.
Mm,
I did
yeah.
pinch myself quite often. But you know how it is. You suddenly get into a studio and suddenly there's people around you who are have been there for years and they're jaded and they're not
Sure.
they've kind of lost their soul's been crushed, and you're
Yeah.
all excited to be there and you fight that off for as long as you can.
But eventually,
Eventually, it
you start
catches
to
up with you.
recognize that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So eventually,
Eventually, you're
you
that
end up
person.
yeah, you know too much. At some point, you have too much experience, and
We can start crushing, other kids' dreams. You can
it's
be
true.
that
Now
person
I
that's like,
teach. I do a lot of teaching, so yeah, I do that firsthand now by telling people exactly what it is, what it's like.
yeah, I think it's. I try to be the person now when I tell younger people about it. I try to be very, very honest, but also to say
Hmm.
like, look, this is like a son of a bitch type of industry to get into, and I mean art more like generally, but also like it's for the people that are willing to have an adventure. If you go into it expecting the magical, perfect experience, you're going to be that guy chewing on a cigar 20 years from now, telling a kid to piss off, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta be ready for the ride. So now, when this is also the time during this period, was this also when they would they pay you by the foot, right?
Yeah. Well, I got paid. I was a full time employee, so they paid me a salary. But
Okay.
how it worked there was there was a footage rate based on each project.
Yeah.
So what you would do is you'd have a quota that you had to fill
Oh, okay.
each week. So
Yeah.
so they expected you to hit a certain amount of footage,
Uh-huh.
depending on the show, and then any foot you did beyond that, you got paid extra.
Ah,
So that was great incentive to do. As I think my quota was like 50 feet a week or something
yeah.
like that.
I have, and that means
Um,
like nothing because you're talking about feet of film, right?
Feet of film, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 24 frames a second,
24
feet of
frames.
film,
Oh,
yeah,
jeez.
yeah,
Yeah, that's insane.
yeah.
Did you find my mind when I think about that, my mind kind of goes like, oh, well, that's like a recipe for shoddy work. Did you find that it helped you to learn how to, shorthand things, like approach things in smart ways to kind of it discipline you in a good way?
Well, so I was in Hanna Barbera learning how to do like TV animation, and the beauty of working in that system is it's all about efficiency. It's all
Mm,
about, I mean, just the way the characters are designed, the way that
mm-hmm,
the way they time it, the way they stage each shot, the
mm-hmm.
reuse, the way that they you think about. pose to pose animation and reusing certain poses, and you learn to be really quick and efficient about how
Mm.
you choose to, like, how you stage something or how you make something, because you're making a product that has to, you have to do so many feet a week. So
Yeah.
so you so yeah, I learned a lot about how to get stuff done.
Yeah.
How to like, where the rubber hits the road. You have to, like, I would never start the beginning of the week. You get a pile of scenes,
Hmm.
folders, and from like, you get a stack of, like, a sequence out of whatever
Like
you're
storyboards,
working
that's
on.
kind of what it would be.
It'd come as a folder, and it would have a layout. It would have a
Mm.
chart,
Hmm.
camera chart with, and then it would have a few layout drawings
Hmm.
of what the character has to do. It'd have a Xerox of the background, and any registration points, and
Mm.
anything that you needed to, and a description of what had to take place.
Now, are your layout artists? Do they kind of, are they on the same page as you? Are you gonna have to like go back and forth and be and like, what the hell are you giving me here? Or most of them like, do they understand the
No,
gig?
you didn't have any time for that.
Yeah.
It was they would look at the storyboard,
Yeah.
which sometimes came from the States, I think, and
Yeah.
sometimes was done locally. But the layout artist would get the storyboard. He would do a few key poses of the character, probably not drawn on model, just drawn quickly, but posed nicely,
Yeah.
uh, if you're lucky. And then he'd do a nice drawing of the background, because the background would then go to the background department to be painted for the scene,
Mm.
and the layouts would come to us. So but it would all be put in one folder. So you would, I'd have a stack of these, and then I would just go through, work my way through these really quickly, do a rough pass on all of the scenes, and then go back and be working on two or three scenes at once.
Mm.
So you basically take the layouts, you put the background down on your light box, and you rough this thing out. You'd work the poses, and you'd try and get your key poses down. You'd make sure that you're trying to put it on model. You keep it nice and loose initially, so
Hmm.
very loose drawings, and do them as quickly as you can. Then you do a kind of a rough. Once you've got all your layouts and your key storytelling, key poses roughed out, you do like a quick straight ahead pass on
Mm.
these things.
Hmm.
Get your overlap, all of that kind of stuff, and then you go back and you do a cleaner version of it. You put the timing charts on for the in betweener, and you'd fill in your camera charts as you go. You number your drawings,
Mm.
um, and then you do so you do like a first pass, second pass, and then you had time for a third pass if you're lucky, and then off it goes to get approved and into the in between department.
Yeah.
And by that time, you're onto your next sequence. So.
Yeah.
Um,
Geez, it's really like birth by fire or whatever they call it, like trial by fire.
yeah, no, it really was. You had to, and the other interesting thing is, because it was, when I first started, it was seasonal work. So the work would go for like 6 to 8 months, and then they closed the studio because it
Mm.
was it was set around the NBC and CBS and ABC and their Saturday morning
Yeah.
schedule
Yep.
for their shows. Uh, so there'd be a break, which I never actually experienced. But because it was like that, the older guys weren't necessarily that keen to help the newer ones along in terms
Mm.
of how to do this stuff. So you had to kind of figure it out for yourself, because they didn't want to be doing themselves out of work. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
you know, so there was it was like, you kind of figure it out, and then you ask questions, and hopefully they don't tell you the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So one of the best things I ever did, though, early on, was I volunteered for to work through the break a couple of times to do all the fix-ups, because what
Mm.
would happen is, everybody's moving so fast, is there would be like mistakes and camera reshoots and all of this stuff that needed to be redone, and I put my hand up for that a couple of times, and they said, "Yeah, sure. If you want to be a loser and come in and work on all these fixes that, yeah, great. So I did that, and it was the best thing I ever did because I got to
Hmm.
actually go through all of these other guys' work, look at how they charted things, look at how they and I had to go and
Wow.
fix things. But
Yeah.
while I did that, like for 2 or 3 months, I'm fixing stuff and I'm learning what the other people
You're
are,
like
how they're doing
they're
it.
studying their timing and stuff and looking at how they do
Yeah,
that and
just like, oh, wow, yeah, okay, and figuring out how they chart stuff and how,
yeah.
it was all there. And so by the time I was into my second season or third season there, it was I had it down. So, but yeah, I did learn a lot that I ended up taking to feature animation when I ended up doing feature animation in London, and then I found that I was given a bunch of shots that are like were crippling
Hmm.
shots, and I was way out of my league when I worked on some of the feature stuff. But what I
What
realized,
was your first thing that you did? How did you make the transition
oh, I was
to
in.
doing the feature stuff?
We decided to. I worked on a feature first in Australia, a thing called Footrot Flats, which was like from
Hmm.
a New Zealand comic strip.
Hmm.
And I worked on that as an in betweener, and I did a bit of cleanup stuff, and that was really fun experience. And then I went back to Hanna-Barbera for a bit, and then my wife and I decided to move to London. So we moved to London
Hmm.
for a couple of years, 3 years, I think. Um,
Hmm.
and she was a film editor, and she worked in some did some editing work, and I we landed in London when suddenly a few years earlier, Roger Rabbit had been done there, and all these
Okay.
there was like
Yeah.
it was like a there was so much work, and of course, because I'm in Australia, I'm hearing that there's so much work in London. But by the time I got there, there was nothing. It was like it
Yeah.
was, and of course, I'm a new guy from Australia. They're not going to give me work. They're going to give the local people, people they
Hmm.
know. They're going to give them work. So I
Yeah.
went. So I spent ages, going from studio to studio, showing them my stuff, trying to get work. Picked up bits and pieces of freelance, and worked on a couple of animated operas that were
Hmm.
done in the Welsh BBC. So
Wow.
yeah, so I had to get on a train and go to Wales and
Uh-huh.
pick up work and then come back to London and then animate all
Hmm.
this stuff and then take it back. So I did a bunch of those, um, and yeah, I ended up working in a couple of commercial studios in London, doing TV commercials, and got to know a few of the studios and got to know which pubs were the animation pubs, so that which is where all the people work in
Ooh,
animation go and have
rough
lunch.
places.
Yeah,
You don't
so
want to stroll into one of those animation pubs
that
like
was, yeah,
unannounced.
true. You could rough part of London, but so I kind of did that for a while, and then my wife actually got a job working for Amblimation. She was worked on a film called We're Back in the
Yep.
editorial
Hmm.
department. I had applied there, but I didn't get in, and then I applied again. And I was speaking to a bunch of the local lads, the English
Hmm.
animators,
Hmm.
and they'd say
Hmm.
they'd all applied there, and nobody had, none of them had gotten a look in at all. Yeah, eventually I applied again and got a call back and ended up going in and meeting them, and they offered me a job on a film called
Hmm.
Balto,
Yeah.
drawing dogs in the wind
Hmm. Hmm.
in perspective and quadrupeds and yeah, and so I did that for two years. I think I was on that for a
Wow.
couple of years, and it was, I was really completely in over my head, surrounded
Mm.
by people that were all so much better than me,
Mm.
and working really hard, like trying to do a good job. So, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. Hard work, but
Yeah.
it was an interesting studio. It was like the United Nations. There was people from every. There was the French quarter. there was there was Italians. There was Canadians and people
Wow.
from the States, local British people. It was quite a studio. It was unique, unique experience.
Yeah. Did you now for you as you are learning the trade of animation? Do you remember like a specific time when it clicked that like, oh hey, I think I've got this now? Was there ever a point where you just suddenly felt like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing now?
Yes, I think so. I think it was. I left London, went back to Australia for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
did some more like commercial work and a little bit of feature stuff in Australia, and then uh, went to work at Warner Brothers Feature Animation, and I think I was starting to feel like my draftsmanship was I was feeling comfortable with being able to turn things in space and move things around
Hmm.
and so yeah, I think it's probably took about 10 years, I'd say.
Yeah, you've told that to me before. Is
Yeah.
that a pretty common thing within the animation industry? They say like it takes about 10 years to really
I
learn the
think it
craft.
takes about 10 years to be good at anything, I think.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think that's a good, obviously it's different for some people, it's different, it's a
Mm-hmm.
generalization, but it felt like about after doing this for about 10 years I started to feel that I wasn't like faking it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, everything, the bottom fell out of the 2D animation industry. And
What was that like from your perspective? Like I was still a kid when that was all going on, but for you, what how was that experienced seeing the bottom fall out?
it was, in some ways, it was terrifying, and in other ways, it was like incredibly exciting.
Hmm.
Uh, because it was like I kind of knew how to move something and make it be
Mm-hmm.
convincing at this point, but
Mm-hmm.
suddenly there's this technology that you know there was something new to learn. It was like
Mm-hmm.
and I bought it when I went back to Australia. I bought a computer, my first PC, and it was expensive. It was like 10 grand or something, which was a lot of
Sure.
money.
Yeah.
But
I mean, was it
I've
one of these specifically made for animation back in the
It
days?
was, yeah, it
Back
was
in the day.
it was, and we had a like a thing called a video toaster, and my
Mm-hmm.
friend had an Amiga, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and he was into the computer stuff, and we did a bunch of stuff, and I kind of organically just got, because I was still doing 2D stuff back in Australia,
Mm-hmm.
but I was messing around with the computer and kind of figuring out how it works and what it does and what we could do with it and all of that. Not really doing animation with it, but just familiarizing myself with how it works. Still drawing and still working on commercials and some feature stuff. So it was kind of a slow organic introduction. I worked on I worked traditionally for a number of years after that until until I went up to PDI and worked
Hmm.
on. They were working on ants.
What was PDI? What's that?
PDI was Pacific Data Images, and that was the company that ultimately made Shrek.
Oh, okay.
It was kind of like Pixar. It had basically, the story is that the people who made the software that the Pixar uses to do their animation, I think there was two of these guys, and they split up, and one developed software at PDI and the other one developed stuff at Pixar. And so there was very similar kind of
Okay.
approach to creating software to make like story driven
Hmm.
stuff.
Was this in London too?
This was in San Francisco.
San Francisco. Okay.
PDI also did visual effects and commercials as well, and
Hmm.
then they had the feature unit as well. So they were doing a bunch of stuff. They did something like before I was there. They did. You ever see the 3D version of The Simpsons
Yes, I remember that
for
well.
The Halloween
Mm-hmm.
version? That was done at PDI.
Okay.
Um, they did the black and white morphing video of Michael Jackson and all the faces changing.
Ah,
So
yeah.
so PDI did that. They're incredible technical innovations that were done at that studio. Yeah, very very clever people. So it was. We're in an industry that is kind of driven by technology in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
So I always embraced it when it, and I still do. That's why I moved from film to traditional animation to computer animation, then from feature computer animation to visual effects
Hmm.
projects, from visual effects projects to game industry, and then in the game industry, got to work on lots of different. The year I got into the game industry was the year they released the Wii.
Hmm.
Nintendo released the Wii, so that
Yeah.
completely upended the whole industry.
Hmm.
In a little bit. So my experience in the game industry was also like a whirlwind and roller coaster, because I was at EA who was trying to figure out how to make how does EA make family friendly games. That's not what their
Hmm.
focus really is, and but they couldn't ignore the Wii. So my animation experience meant that I kind of roped into doing a lot of R&D and visual development, and helping to do prototypes and come up with uh, new projects and things like that. So
But now you
because
started.
I could still draw.
Hmm. But you
Yeah,
started out in Florida with EA, right?
I did. Yeah, I went there to head up the cinematics for a game called Superman Returns, which was
Ah, yes.
ill-fated Superman Returns game, and that was my first job in the game industry. I'd had opportunities when I was up in San Francisco to move to EA, because a lot of
Hmm.
my friends went from PDI to EA, and I used to go over there for lunch all the time. And there was a couple of opportunities to go to EA at that point, but I ended up going. I ended up finishing at PDI when it was bought out by DreamWorks, uh, who strangely enough were the same studio that I worked with when I was in London.
Hmm.
It was Amblimation that became
Yeah,
DreamWorks.
DreamWorks. Yeah.
So oh, and actually, you know how one thing that I still have at the end of Balto, they were taking the studio over to London, over to LA
Hmm.
to make Prince of Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
And one morning we came in, and there was like envelopes on some of our desks, and
Hmm.
on some of our desks didn't have envelopes on them. And we knew that the film was coming to an end, and we heard that they were moving the studio. So I got an envelope on my desk, of course, and you know what that usually means. So I opened the envelope, and now now remember, I was like the lowest rung of animators when I started on Balto. So I
Hmm.
thought, oh, I'm not going to be uh, given the, because I think they could only take 30
Hmm.
animators,
Geez, that
and there
seems
was
like a big
like,
group.
and they offered me a position
Oh,
on.
cool.
So I got offered to be taken over to part of DreamWorks when it set up in LA. So which I turned down, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting
Um,
because I mean you've never talked about Prince of Egypt, so
yeah, no,
what
I
what was
didn't.
up with that? What drove that decision?
I had friends in LA working in
Hmm.
the industry in LA, and I always figured that I'd eventually I'd work in the States. I mean, it just
Hmm.
felt like a natural progression. But the timing of when I would have to move to LA, we'd been in London, I think, for 3 years, and we just felt like we wanted to go home for a bit. So we wanted to go back to Australia for a while.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd interviewed at Warner Brothers Feature Animation in London. A lot of the studios came and interviewed people in London, because I guess they knew the studio Amblimation was. So
Hmm.
I'd been in a bunch of interviews, and it felt like there was going to be opportunity to get over there and work on something, and it just didn't feel like the right
Huh.
choice
Yeah.
at the time. So I gave my I thanked the producer who it was really I was, to be honest, just knowing that they wanted me
Hmm.
uh, was enough.
Yeah.
Just knowing that I had worked hard enough to be included in the group that they were going to take to LA was all I needed.
That's
So
cool.
I didn't really need the job.
You know, um, if I could interject, one of the things that's really interesting that I've been exploring a lot here on the podcast is like as people think about kind of their own artistic trajectory, it's pretty easy. Or I think what most people want to do is they want to like turn it into as if it's just this very rational, like, oh, you take the best opportunity. And the choices you make in life artistically are actually, there's a lot more going on. And just this idea of like feeling what's the right decision for you can be a pretty interesting decision. I mean, obviously here it's like, if I were someone teaching a kid, it's like, yeah, you get a job offer to go work for DreamWorks. Like you take the job. It's about moving up, right? It's like taking the next opportunity, right?
Yeah, it seemed like a no-brainer, and because everybody in that studio, uh, I mean, there was a lot of people that weren't taken over
Yeah.
to LA, and for me to be offered a position and
Hmm.
not go seems strange, I guess. But at the same time, it wasn't. It just didn't
Hmm.
feel like it was
Yeah.
the right choice.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah.
gut feeling.
That's so crazy. This is like the last discussion I had on this podcast. We were talking just about this whole idea of like feeling your way through decisions.
Yeah,
I mean, part of the challenge I think is just being mature enough and clear headed enough to pay attention to that, because I think that can be one of your best guides when you're like trying to figure out what path to take, is just like, is those gut feelings, you know?
yeah. I kind of always let that rule the choices that
Mm,
I would make in a way. Also, I always liked the Robert Frost idea of taking going
yeah.
the road less traveled.
Yeah.
I always liked that. I always, in order to be pushed creatively, I'd much prefer to choose the thing I haven't done
Yeah,
before.
and I think that that's challenging as an artist, because you think just by choosing to do art that you're already doing that, but it's really easy to get stuck in places even as an artist, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's always like if you're not if you're spend too much time in your comfort zone, you're not growing as an artist. This is another reason that I left the film industry and went to the game industries. That was totally a choice. I just worked on Lord of the Rings. You know, I'd done some Gollum animation, and I was involved with that. And I went to so it's like at that point, I could have probably continued on visual effects uh, studio after visual effects studio, but I was never happy working in visual effects. I was always more interested in like traditional animation
Yeah.
and storytelling and narrative type stuff, and rather than doing like creature animation where here
Yeah.
animate this
Yeah.
horse, make it look like a horse, and I'm like, well, that's like technically proficient being able to do that. That's cool, but I mean, I was worked on a film where I had to
Mhm.
animate dogs with a pencil, for goodness sakes. So, and that's another thing is I think I got to the point in computer animation where it just wasn't, moving a
Mhm.
puppet around in a screen in a 3D space is just not. After you've like drawn animation and you've worked on like stuff that's really challenging, it's kind of not for people who want to become an animator and work on computer animation. It sounds really, but it just didn't. It wasn't
Hmm.
challenging anymore. I didn't feel like it was challenging me. I missed drawing. I missed making art.
I can't remember who said it, but I think someone once said that like, you know, animating with a pencil is still 3D animation. It's just you're doing those calculations in your head. It's not the computer that's doing them, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I teach that now, and I teach people to draw through their when we're roughing something out to draw through the volume of the
Mhm.
character. Think of it in volume. Don't think of it as a 2D thing that's moving around. Think of it in 3D
Yeah.
space. I think that's why it was so easy for me to transition to computer animation, as I'd been thinking that way all along. For me, computer animation was always when I did traditional animation. You're drawing this stuff, and then the stuff that you draw, it's cleaned up, but it's on screen. Like
Mhm.
it's the stuff that you do is you have that uh, connection to the work. And when you do computer animation, there are so many
Mhm.
layers between like what I did, the few scenes I did of in Lord of the Rings. When I would block out the animation and get the animation approved, and then I see the final composited, rendered, lit. But it's just it doesn't. There's so many people have touched
Yeah.
that between what I've done and what they did. It's not my work anymore. It's a collective uh, piece of art, or at that point, which is great too. I mean, it's amazing because it's the only way it can be done. It's only the way something like that can be achieved.
Sorry, sometimes it's like I look at the credits for like these blockbusters, and again, it's like there's some pretty amazing stuff they do in these blockbusters, but you see these like 20 studios that contributed, and you're like, where's the point of view in all this? You know, where's like the point of
Yeah,
view, or
yeah,
some sort of like opinion, or about whatever, about reality, about the world, about life, and it becomes so diffused that there's something that kind of becomes generic about it because there isn't some sort of singular point of view or some sort of singular vision that ties those things together. Um,
yeah. It's true. It's kind of it's not it's your expression, the thing that you did to contribute to that, has been watered down to, it's hopefully it's done its job, and you'll be able to hand it on to the next person who can then do their bit and make it even more
mm-hmm,
amazing. But I just missed that immediacy, um, and I found that when I, strangely enough, uh, doing art direction in games, I felt like when I made something, even though I was working through other
mm-hmm,
people, and I see people interact directly with the art that I had made,
mm-hmm.
or that I had art directed or created or whatever. It felt like that immediacy again.
Yeah,
It felt like even though there was a whole bunch of technology between what I created and the person holding the controller, it still felt like they were manipulating stuff that I had a hand in creating. So it felt like it was a few steps backwards from, or back to the traditional stuff for me.
yeah. All of my favorite stuff at maybe this touches on this. All my favorite stuff from EA are all the projects that got canceled. That was all the stuff I was most excited about. All my best work.
Yeah.
But I think about did now were you art director on Wildlife? Is that what it was called?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I was.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
aesthetic of that game was just so unique and so much fun.
I remember my first. It was Dustin who brought me onto that, and he. Yeah, I remember my first conversation with him about that, and he's a guy I'd like to have. That's one thing about something that was frustrating for me about EA Salt Lake. There's some people there that I would like to have. I'd like to have worked more with you.
Yeah.
I'd like to have worked more with Dustin. I'd like to have done. I did a lot of work with Joe Borey.
Mm-hmm.
Worked with Ryan McBride a lot, and there's people that I didn't get a chance to work with a lot. Like Bronze, I never really worked with Bronze at all on anything,
Mm-hmm.
and got to work with Gibbs a little bit. But there was people there. I'd love to have worked with Dustin on something uh, more, but we were always on different.
Yeah, totally know that feeling. For me, I had come to EA through Bronze and Gibbs. We had worked at another studio together, and like
Mhm.
I never worked with those guys. And it's like those are two of my favorite guys in the world.
Right. Yeah,
We
yeah.
never worked together. So,
I know it's crazy. I used to go. I used to go to the little pet shop department
yeah.
specifically to talk to those guys and make fun of those guys and just enjoy them. But Wildlife was definitely a labor of love. It's a lot of people that put everything they had into that thing, including me. I did animation on that. I did lighting.
Mm-hmm.
I went into the engine because the lighting wasn't feeling volumetric enough and things weren't going through. Like I wanted the characters to move through pools of light, so I
Mm-hmm.
had to learn how to use their lighting
Oh, geez.
set up. And I went up there for a week and lit the levels. Lowell did and did so much. He did like above and beyond. He was a designer on that. He was an artist on that. He was, there was just a small team of people trying to And they constantly were taking people off the team because to
Yeah.
support the projects that needed to be shipped, which is totally understandable. But
Yeah, that was I was wishing I could work on wildlife while I was working on like Facebook Risk,
yeah,
I think. Which was that was quirky and weird in its own way, but
yeah, it was. Yeah, it was
I should
fantastic.
I should
Love that.
explain like the concept of wildlife. It was like basically first person competitive multiplayer where you play as different animals within a like a forest scenario, right? And each one has
Yeah,
its own objectives. It's like a fox, an alligator, a rabbit, a hawk. Is there a frog in there too, or
there
um
was a frog and a mosquito
and a
initially,
mosquito?
but they
Yeah,
we pulled those out because we had to
yeah.
scope it down.
But hopefully, I don't know if there's stuff online still where you can see like bits and pieces of
There
that. But
is if you yeah we did a teaser trailer and
mm,
that's still online. The annoying thing about it is it was probably the most fun thing to play that I've ever actually worked on. Um, it was just a very visceral kind of experience.
that was a big heartbreaker for me. Even looking at the outside, there was just the sense that that's one
Yeah,
of those games that would have been really special. You know, it
yeah.
just didn't fit within the business model of EA, right?
It didn't, and it it required marketing dollars that just didn't end up being there. So
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, whether it was virtually finished or not, it's above our pay grade to. But yeah, it's an unfortunate thing. I was probably most proud of my art direction choices on that
Mm,
than most of the things that I've worked on because when I first played the white box of that, and I'd had a couple of conversations with Dustin about the art direction and what to potentially do with it and my animation experience kind of kicked in because I realized that if something's moving horizontally, and you think about like visual storytelling and the idea of creating art that takes a game experience and intensifies it. If something which in that
mm-hmm.
you're moving horizontally through this environment and you're moving quite fast, but a way to make it feel
Mm-hmm.
even more fast is to have a whole bunch of verticals in the background and have the edges
Mm-hmm.
of the art be hard edges so that and have the characters be hard edged so that as they're moving you're able to read those hard edges. If everything was round and soft, everything wouldn't
Mm.
have felt as fast and it wouldn't have with the pace of the game. I think the art direction really enhanced the gameplay, which is what it's all about. So
That's yeah,
yeah,
the whole
so
purpose there.
I was pretty proud
Yeah.
of the fact that the choices I was able to make there were really supported that gameplay a lot. So and it looked okay, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you could pretty fairly call the death of wildlife like the last creative gasp of EA Salt Lake. Like
Yes.
I think of all the fun projects that were cooked there, and that was the last one that was like
The
really
unfortunate thing is that we had
interesting.
you know, uh, Joe and Dustin and Lowell had um, a whole list of follow up games. There was an
Mm-hmm.
Arctic one, there was an underwater one, there was they had the franchise figured out. It could have been a potentially
Mm-hmm.
a big franchise for EA, but c'est la vie.
Yeah, C'est la vie. It's a pretty rare privilege in life to be able to make art. It's even more of a rare privilege when you actually have a chance to like work with a team of artists to make something
Oh yeah,
amazing. You
yeah,
know.
yeah. It was a great experience. I wish it had seen the light of day, but I learned that I certainly
Mm.
learned a lot working on that project. So
Well, so now that with where you are right now, like what is your gut calling you towards now? Like what sort of challenges interest you these
well,
days?
uh, after I left EA, I
Mm.
had the family had been here in Omaha for I think 2.5 years or so. And with me
Mm,
traveling back and forth every 2 weeks,
yeah.
it was hard for me to get established in the with any local studios, or really get familiar with anybody else who was doing the kind of thing I was doing here. So I was kind of living here, but I wasn't really involved artistically or locally in any way. So that changed when I left EA. I reached out to a few people I'd been introduced to, and I got to know a few smaller studios here, and then started mentoring at a local museum. They had a program where they mentor teens, and so I did a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
that. Got involved with that. Then I got offered a job in New Orleans as a studio art director of Gameloft in New Orleans. So I ended up taking that and
Hmm.
going down. That was a mobile studio. So I ended up living in the French
Mm-hmm.
Quarter of New Orleans for 2.5 years, working working
Wow.
working on mobile games for Gameloft at this French company that I was
I think I applied there
you
what
probably
one at
did.
one
They had,
point,
yeah, you probably did. But I enjoy. I would have hired you in
which
a minute if I
it
could
must
have.
have been while you were.
Didn't
Yeah.
apply while I was there.
Yeah, I was gonna say it must have been while you were there because you were like, yeah, I know. Well, we can cross this one off the
Yeah,
list.
it turned out that I actually I enjoyed living in New Orleans, and I enjoyed the art directing the team. Gameloft wasn't the best fit for Ken Keys as a company. They were very
I can.
they were a
Mm,
French-based company that were kind of, yeah. It wasn't a good fit. But saying that, I was there for 2.5 years. I did get invested in working with the team, managing the team, and their plan was to turn the studio into a studio that could create prototypes and create original content. So that's why I was hired
sure.
to lead that up.
Yeah.
So that's that. I did that for 2.5 years. Again, a little bit of telecommuting back here to New Orleans, which kind of having done telecommuting for 5 something years, uh, I was pretty much
Oh, geez.
burnt out, and I realized kind of probably my first year at Gameloft that it's time that I focused on becoming more independent and doing my own
Hmm.
thing, and working with small groups of people, collaborating on things. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Writing more. I've been writing a lot more. I've got some
Mm-hmm.
books and some short films that I'm been working on, and I've been teaching. So I teach at a couple of colleges here, and teach animation and visual storytelling, art direction, and such. So I do that, and I also do jobs as they come in. I do animation. I do a lot
Sure.
of rigging, 2D rigging with
Mm-hmm.
Spine 2D and with um, Moho, which is a basically vector-based program that you can take 2D artwork that you've created in Photoshop or within the program and rig it and animate it. So last year I did a project where I created an app with a bunch. I did all the rigging, and I worked with a local studio called Edison, and I also basically kind of managed the project. And I had got my old buddy Ryan McBride to tech direct that. So he and I still work together whenever we get a chance. We've
Awesome.
just finished a game for the Paper and Package group of America. So we just worked for the government, he and I, and we did a mobile game because we pitched so many mobile games when we were at EA. When we
Mm-hmm.
left EA, we made a
Mm-hmm.
mobile game and we finished it and we got it out there. It wasn't very good, but it was. We wanted to show ourselves that we could finish something. So I did all the art, and
Yeah.
we got it out there on iOS and Android, and we've made a bunch of things together since then. We've got some other
Oh, cool.
prototypes that we're working on, which we just mess around and do some stuff in Unity, and so I work with him. Yeah, do a bunch of stuff. I've got some. graphic novels I'm working on, inspired by you,
Nice.
somebody like yourself who's actually uh, done that. That's something I've never done. So I've got some children's books that I'm working on, and
Yeah.
I've got a book on visual storytelling based on a course that I put together for Hastings College a couple of years ago. So keeping busy, trying to stay independent more than anything else. I
Yes.
don't really want to work in the studio or like full time with a studio anymore. That would be a step backwards. Um, I found that the year I spent after Gameloft, I got so much done. So my next this challenge is just being independent and trying to help other people release stuff and try to create some
Hmm.
stuff myself. And that's what my focus is these days.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think I'm probably in a similar place. I just I'm trying to I clearly went independent for a little while to do my graphic novel. Um and but there's other parts of that I want to figure out. I just feel like I would love to be able to get the collaborative nature of a studio without having to deal with the
Yeah,
bullshit aspect of a
yeah,
studio, so part of it for me is figuring out like how can I make that happen where I can collaborate on like purely artistic projects with people that are passionate about like just
hmm
making cool art, and whatever happens, it's going to be put out there into the world and be a gift to humanity, and just
yeah.
leave it at that.
I've connected with a studio here called Edison Creative, and they've created a bunch
Mm-hmm.
of TV show pitches. I don't even know how we found each other, but we kind of did. I've worked on a few things with them, and I got to help them look at their story that they were pitching and give them feedback and
Mm-hmm.
I've done some kind of rigging and some collaboration with them, and they're super creative and they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to get some TV shows. So I feel like if they hit it, if either of us get anything like that, we'd probably work together and so yeah, that's been the joy of being in one place. Is I've been able to really connect with local people and I'm part of the Nebraska Arts Council. I've been in one place long enough to
Oh,
be
very
able
cool.
to do that. So
Ken Key's finally putting down roots.
it's been nice to be able to get involved with like locally and all this stuff in my head, try and
Yeah,
like share it because I need to make some more space up here so I can do other things. Um, so that yeah, that's
yeah.
basically what I've been focused on and will be focused on for the next well, for however long I've got. I've also I started painting again
Sure.
over the
Oh, that's very
uh,
cool.
when the pandemic hit. I lost like the beginning of the year. I had like 4 or 5 gigs lined up, and I lost half of them immediately. so so I'm like, oh, okay, well.
Yeah,
So yeah, I've started playing around with painting again, back to my roots of uh,
your
yeah.
roots.
So yeah, I've been doing that.
But you're pretty committed, to, like Omaha, that you're gonna
No. The thing
build a
that's
foundation,
great about what I do now is I everything I do is for the last 3 years has been remote.
so you don't even have to be committed.
So I could work with the people I work with here uh, in Omaha and
Mm-hmm.
not even be here. Because I can
Yeah,
do it. I can do it anywhere. So yeah, that's kind of what I've
nice,
tried to focus on too, to be able to be free to
cool.
move. My kids are about to finish high school, so they're you know
Mm.
I'm not going to say we'll be in Omaha forever, but we don't have any plans to.
Hmm.
We couldn't leave if we wanted to right now, so yeah, no, we're kind of stuck. So, but it's a nice size city, and also I don't have to have the corporate job that I would have to have if I was living on either coast.
Hmm.
So because the cost of living is
Sure.
lower, so
Yeah.
I can afford to not have to sell my soul to
Yeah.
to to the devil. So
Yeah.
which is nice.
But the fame and glory, Ken. What about the fame and glory?
Been there, done that. Yeah, it was. I don't know that there's anything. I just really want to collaborate with people,
Mm,
like-minded people, work with who I
yeah.
want to work with, and I don't even really care what I'm working on, because I'm
Yeah.
working on my own stuff on the side. So I'll do anything to make a buck within reason. Uh, you know,
No standards.
no, none. I have called
Well,
myself an industry whore more than once over the years.
well, you're not alone in calling you that. We all call you that, Ken. Just
Good, good. Just not to my face.
yeah. Well, Ken, I really hope we have a chance to like find a way to work together. I just like it brings back so many good
It, it,
memories.
it, we just have to make it happen. That's all.
We got to make it
It's just,
happen.
it's just, a, it's yeah. It's, now that we're free
Yes.
of the bondages of corporate America, we can do
hmm
that.
So let's figure something out. It would be fun.
Would be.
So
I can guarantee you, it won't be boring.
cool. Well, Ken, I'm going to let you go. I'm going to go try to wrangle my kids, and they're pretty amped for Thanksgiving tomorrow. So,
Oh yes, yes. Have a great Thanksgiving, and it
yeah,
was
you too,
it was so
man.
it was so nice to catch up.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure, man. I hope we can make this more of a regular thing. So, you've been listening to How to Be an Artist. To support this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/H2BNA.